How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at 1982's Alone in the Dark. This is written and directed by Jack Sholder, stars Jack Palance, Donald Pleasence from the Halloween movies, we remember him, Martin Landau, and even though she doesn't have the biggest role here, we do get a pre-Insidious Lin Shaye in here. Always cool to see her. In this movie, a group of criminals escape an insane asylum and attack a doctor's house for a perceived wrong against them. It's a pretty interesting movie with some interesting character beats and an interesting sort of take on psychology from Donald Pleasence's character. Very different than Sam Loomis, and it does lead to a pretty fun finale. There are some pacing issues. For example, the movie starts way too late. It takes a while to get going, and there's this whole thing with a power. I'll get to it in a minute. But I do want to say, it's one of those movies that's pretty good. It's a bit of a cult classic. I'm glad Shout Factory put it out onto Blu-ray. That's really cool, but at the same time, I can totally see why we don't talk about this as much as the big names, and it's one of those movies that I'm like, if it was just a little better and with just a few edits, it really could have been an absolute classic. As it stands now, it's pretty good. It's worth checking out. I might have some complaints later on. Before we dive into the meat of the review, I do want to say a few more things. One, this has nothing to do with a lot of the other stuff called Alone in the Dark. Alone in the Dark is apparently a pretty common title. There was a video game series with the same name, which spawned the 2006 UA Bowl movie. All that stuff unrelated to this. There's also a Tubi movie that just came out recently that, as far as I can tell, again, not related to this. So you don't need to know anything about any other Alone in the Dark. This is its own thing. One other interesting thing, this is a New Line Cinema movie. They're quite famous for the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and this movie actually takes place in Springwood as well. So cool, they share a setting. And also, we have a Tom Savini special effect in here. It's a dream sequence character that does kind of come out of nowhere, but good to see Savini as well. Anyway, with all that being said, let's talk a bit about the plot. I'm not going to do any major spoilers, but I do want to go through the movie, take some moments to analyze it, and say my piece on a few plot points. Again, no major spoilers, but I do want to do a little bit of analysis. I'll just be avoiding too terribly much of the end. Anyway, we do open up with a fun, surreal dream sequence. We kind of have to because, like I said, the movie does take a while to get going. Maybe instead they could have opened with one of the criminals and how they got into prison. I don't know. But we get a dream sequence where this pastor goes to a small diner and biblical plagues start to happen and the cook comes out of the back and kills him. Well, he wakes up, finds out he's a patient in an asylum, and that the cook that killed him, Donald Pleasence's character, isn't actually a cook, but the head of the asylum that he's in. A bit of a fun role reversal, even though the opening is a little disorienting and doesn't have anything to do with much of the rest of the movie. I do wish it was played up more because it is referenced once later, but then doesn't seem to have much to do with anything. Kinda wish this movie was a little more surreal with this opening, but whatever. Anyway, Donald Pleasence goes to meet this new doctor he's hired. And the new doctor, in turn, gets to find out about Donald Pleasence's way of going about things. He's very compassionate and understanding about the inmates in his asylum, And, you know, it is refreshing to see someone who legitimately cares for people, but at the same time, maybe he's not firm enough, and maybe he is a little too trusting. There's a scene that exemplifies this, where Donald Pleasence gives a patient some matches, and of course, he sets a fire that he really shouldn't. And we get to see that, you know, like the other doctors are like, we told him he couldn't have matches for a reason, but Donald Pleasence wants to have that sense of trust amongst him and his patients and wants to treat them more humanely. And I get where that's coming from, but at the same time, maybe it's not working. And I do like this back and forth between the new, more stricter doctor and Donald Pleasence being the more laid-back one, and knowing that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and getting some good sort of analysis between the two characters. Plus, it really does set this Donald Pleasence apart from his Sam Loomis performance, because Sam Loomis, through Michael Myers, had given up on the system completely and was saying that Michael was just pure evil. So we do get Sam Loomis playing a similar job, but the part is very different. I do like that. We get the top floor of the asylum, and that's where they keep the dangerous inmates. And I mean, really bad people. This guy burned down a church with people locked inside. This guy assaults young children. That's really bad. But we also get this character called the Bleeder, someone who loves to strangle women, and his nose will bleed whenever he does it. The Bleeder, that's a cool name. Now, it sounds like Donald Pleasence doesn't really like all the security he has to do on the top floor, but the state's kind of making him. And he has this electronic security system, and one of the guards is like, the only thing between me and them is electricity. And then we get a power outage, because of course we do. And I'm like, maybe we needed some more manual stuff. Supposedly, they had something that was supposed to be a backup and it failed as well. But really, man, no, this really was a huge oversight. So, during the blackout, all the patients get out, and there's a huge riot. Even though it seems like the power just turned off, and now all of a sudden, everybody's just rioting and attacking each other. Gee, that's crazy. But at the same time, this is a town that would kill Freddy Krueger when he got off on a technicality. I guess we can see what the citizens of Springwood are like. Anyway, the escapees are able to blend in. We get, as shown on the cover, the Bleeder does briefly put on the hockey mask to hide his face, and that's used extensively in the advertisements. 1982 was the same year that Jason would get his own hockey mask, so this is probably just a case of simultaneous inspiration, but still is interesting to see another character wear one, although, as I said, very briefly. But anyway, the killers are going to go to the newly hired doctor's house because their leader is convinced that the new doctor killed his old doctor and took his job. And they do actually take a moment to analyze this psychology as well, which I really do like. You know, to the new doctor, he's just like, it's a better job, it's a new opportunity, I'm moving over there, no big deal. But they said to the patient, this was one of the few people that would listen to and try to understand him. To leave him is to abandon him. It's a major break in his trust, and he can't accept that. He says the only way he would leave is if the new doctor killed him. So it's quite obviously a misperceived injustice, but they do go as to say, here's why it happened, which I think is really, really interesting, and you can break down and analyze it more. So, you know, from the villain's perspective, he's acting quite righteously. He's going after a murderer, even though we all know he isn't really. So it's an interesting setup there. They're going to go and get the doctor, and then it's the next day. One moment in this film absolutely killed the pacing. We had such a good setup. We took some time, we got to know the characters, we're messing around this asylum for a little bit. A good setup, and then the power goes out. It's the night, right? No, we're gonna go back to the daylight. One dark night when the power goes out, that would have been a good setup. We did our time building up. We put ourselves in the position. It was ready to go. And then we get more exposition. We get more setup. We go back again to the safety of the daylight. Doing this additional day, they did it because they had ideas for the criminals to do stuff, but they were supposed to happen before the nighttime, and they just, had to write in an extra day. But it absolutely killed it going back to the sunlight. Ruined the tension and the pacing. Just saying, okay, here's more of the... I don't want to gripe too hard. Whatever ideas they had that made this second day necessary, even the creepy scene where the guy that was convicted of assaulting a child, it looks like he might get another one, I think that was probably the creepy scene that they came up with that forced them to do it. Cut it. It needed to go straight into the night. But anyway, we do eventually get there. We do eventually get to the doctor and his family. His estranged sister comes back, and they are stuck in the house while all the criminals are outside starting to get in. That's the good part. It sucks that it took a little bit too long to get here, but when you see, like, the criminals have a crossbow and it busts through the windows and almost hits somebody, it does hit another person, like pinning them to a tree. There's some good, really tense moments in here. There's good special effects, and I always do love a defend the base story. I do like also, again, this does set up psychology and character, and getting to see the doctor's family, who is just a bunch of normal people, and now they might have to attack and maybe even kill some of these inmates. They acknowledge that that's going to put them in a tough spot and affect their psyche, which I think is really good. The kills, though, I do want to say some of them are a little cartoony. Like one guy gets hit by a car and goes absolutely flying. And I think there was a little bit of a struggle in this movie. Again, I didn't look up too much of the production, but there are some times in this movie where it wants to be a really fun 80s horror film, and then sometimes where it wants to be a serious psychological study. And, you do get some of those serious scenes, and contrast that with the goofier kills later at the end. I love the goofy kills, don't get me wrong. They don't 100% match the beginning of the movie, but that being said, when we get to the end, when we get to the defend the base stuff, that is where this all pays off, and it's in general pretty good, and I think that's why a lot of people remember and highly recommend this movie. And I have to say, I do think this is pretty good. I see why it has a cult following. I still think it took a little too long to get to the good part, and that going back into the sunlight part was a huge mistake. But overall, I do think this movie is pretty fun. I definitely would recommend it. It's good to see Donald Pleasence in here as well. And yeah, lots of good stuff, but it is flawed, and I do want to say that. Anyway, though, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. If you guys want to see more stuff like this, you can click right here and see more. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Playlist down here. Have a good day now.